Hello everyone, this is Professor Robert Solis. Welcome to this video lesson. We're going to be working with random numbers by creating an app that allows the user to click a button called Flip Coin, and it's simply going to flip a quarter. And it's either going to show in heads or tails. And we're going to have a text box over here that keeps track of how many times heads has come up and how many times tails has come up by just simply listing. Every time we click Flip Coin, if tails shows up, see, there's the tails right there. And if a head shows up, then underneath it would show heads, so forth and so on. All right, so what we need to do is we need to obtain a quarter image of the front of a quarter and the back of a quarter. And it's got to be a transparent background of type PNG. We're going to create a random number generator that will generate a 0 or a 1. And the 0 is going to represent heads, and the 1 is going to represent tails. We're going to, in the text box, we're going to want to either display heads or tails based on whatever the random selection is. And we're going to want to have a vertical scroll bar. You see the scroll bar right here, right? It's not active right now because we don't have enough items in the text box. But once we do have enough items, then we're going to display that vertical scroll bar. In terms of the picture box, we're going to have the image originally set to none, so nothing appears when you first run the program. And then we'll change the size mode to zoom. So let me switch over here to Visual Studio to show you what the program looks like when I run it. And so here it is, and nothing appears. Nothing's over here. If I click Flip Coin, then heads appears. Let me click it again, heads, tails. Let's see here, heads. All right, so you see how the program works. We're just simply keeping track of when it shows up heads, it displays heads. When it shows up tails, it displays tails, so forth and so on. And then if I keep on going, then you can see that the scroll bar is now active, and I can scroll down to take a look at the various items that have been displayed. Okay, so that's how the program works. Let's do this. Let's go ahead and talk about how to get a quarter image. So I just simply used a Google search, and I typed in quarter image. And over here, in terms of the type of image, I selected transparent. And that means that the background is going to be transparent and that the foreground is the only thing that's going to appear. Most likely, you're probably talking about PNG images. So if I click on this one, say, for example, I'm going to right-click on that, and I'm going to say Save Picture As. And I can save this to wherever I want. I think what I called mine, let's see, what did I call my images? If I go over here to Solution Explorer, I called mine quarter heads and quarter tails. So if I were to go back over here and if I would have saved this image as a PNG image, I would just simply call it quarter heads. And then I'd find another one with the tails of a quarter and call it quarter tails. All right, so that takes care of downloading and finding an image, specifically a PNG image with a transparent background. And so now let's go ahead and talk about these other software requirements. I'm going to switch back over here to Visual Studio. And let's see here. This is a picture box. So what I did is in the toolbox, I dragged and dropped this guy over here, a picture box. That's what this is. This is a button. And this is just a text box. Now, you may not have seen a text box look so tall like this. Well, I had to change some of the different parameters. And the parameters that I changed were as follows. So if I go over here to, let's see here, I think it's multi-lines. Go down a little bit more here. There it is, multi-line. I set that to true. And what that does is it allows you to increase the height because you're going to be writing multiple lines. And then I also activated where it says scroll bars, the vertical scroll bar. So right now it's not active, but as soon as multiple items start to be listed in this text box, then the vertical scroll bar becomes active. So that takes care of the list. And then in terms of the picture box, what I did was this. First of all, I went to Image, and I'm going to click on this button over here, the ellipsis button, and I want to bring in an image. So what I can do is I can just simply say Import. And then where is that image located? Well, let's say that it's located on my desktop or on my downloads or wherever it is. I select the image. Now you can see over here that it's already displaying different image types that I can download. So if I did have an image here in downloads or in documents or wherever, I can click on that and then click open and it would download. It would include that in terms of my project resources. And then I would click import again, and I would import a quarter tails PNG image. Now when I've done that, you'll notice over here in the Solution Explorer that under Resources, you're going to see the names of your two images that you've selected or that you've imported. That happens automatically inside of the Resources folder. All right, so I do that, and I don't necessarily want an image to be displayed when I run the program. You'll see what I'm talking about here. When I run the program, notice that there is not an image displayed. As soon as I click Flip Coin, then an image will display. So for that functionality, you'll notice over here where it says Initial Image. Right? So, well, actually, I didn't even click Initial Image. I just simply clicked over here on Image. Sorry about that. And I just selected Done. So I don't want an image displayed on that image box yet. I want that displayed after I run the program, after the user has clicked the Flip Coin button. Okay, let me click Cancel. And let's take a look at some of the different items over here for this picture box. Well, back over here in the requirements for the picture box, it says that we are supposed to have image none and size mode zoom. So over here you'll see where it says size mode, it's set to zoom, but you have different options that are available. I would suggest that you try these and see what they look like. They change the image in a way that is relative to the description here, and you need to see what those look like. Inevitably, I want you to settle on zoom, and that'll take care of what the image is going to look like when you run the program. Okay. All right, in terms of the names of the various items, I called this guy PCP coin. That's the Hungarian notation for picture box. We're going to call this guy TXT list, and then we're going to call that button BTN flip coin. Once you've created all the names, you're going to save your work. Notice that I took away the minimize and the maximize buttons, and I called this coin flipper. I'm going to double click on the button so it takes me to the code area. And let's take a look at what's going on. Well, the first thing that I'm going to do is to create 3 integer variables. And the 3 integer variables, lower bound, upper bound, and random number, what I want to do is I want to later on initialize lower bound to 0 and upper bound to 1. See, I'm going to let 0 be heads and 1 be coins, because I don't have a way of randomly saying, okay, randomly pick heads or tails. Well, I can't do that. In a random number generator, I can only generate random numbers. So what this upper bound and lower bound is going to do is it's going to say, create for me a random number from this to this. Okay, now the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create a random number generator. Now, this is a class, and this new keyword says that you are going to instantiate from this class a brand new object. And I'm going to call it rand. This is a random number generator for me. It's a random number object. It is of type random. So this is a class, this is an object. How do I know that? Because of the new keyword. Anytime you see that new keyword, you instantiate objects from classes. You can think of this as the parent, you can think of this as the child. You can think of this as an abstract, you can think of this as the manifestation of that abstract. However you want to think about it, whenever you're using that new keyword, what that means is this is the class, this is the object. All right, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create 2 objects of type image. One I'm going to call IMG tails, and the other one I'm going to call IMG heads. And in other words, these guys are the images that I imported into my program. And so what I want to do is I want to say, hey, this image tails, yeah, that's this guy over here. From my resources, that's this image right here. So programmatically, I'm saying, I want you to get from my resources this image, quarter tails, and we're going to put this into a variable called IMG tails, which is of type image. Same thing over here, IMG heads is going to be an image, and you're going to get that image from the resources, specifically from quarter heads. You're saying, hey, what resources? These resources right here. When you imported these 2 images, now that's part of my resources panel or resources folder, and I can grab those. So I'm assigning them to these two variables. All right, we already talked about the lower bound and the upper bound. So now let's create a random number. Well, rand is my random number generator, and .next allows me to create random numbers. Now, let me just type this again. So I'll say random number, and we're going to assign that rand dot. Okay, so let's see here. If I say dot next, you'll see over here that dot next says returns a random, non-negative random integer. So let me put a parentheses right here. Looks like I have three flavors of how the random number generator dot next works. I can return a non-negative random integer. I can return a non-negative random integer that is less than a specified maximum. Or the flavor that I chose is generate a number from this to this, but not including this. So you see the word inclusive, and so if I just say to, say for example, and I put a comma here, now you see the word exclusive when it comes to the max integer. All right, so what does that mean? What that means is I want you to create a number from this to this, but I want to include that in the random number. So in other words, I want you to generate a number from 0 to 1, but you saw that the next says, oh, that number over here, that second number after the comma, that's going to be exclusive. So what that means is I'm going to have to add 1 to this because already it's 1. So I'm really saying this. 1 plus 1 is 2, right? So think about this as 0. Think about this whole thing as 2. Generate for me a random number from this up to but not including 2, which means 1. So in other words, generate a random number from 0 to 1. So this guy is going to either come back as a 0 or a 1. Well, if it comes back as 0, well, we know that that means heads. I'm assigning that to be heads, right? 0, we're going to think about that as heads. And if that's the case, remember over here how I created these two images, these two image variables? Well, the picture box dot image, which in other words over here, this picture box, the property that I want to change is the image property. Where is that? So first of all, let me select this. And properties, there it is, image. And what I'm saying is, hey, change that image property to, and assign it img heads, which is the image that I have in my resources called quarter heads. And then the text box, well, the old version of the text box, I want you to concatenate that with an environment.newline, which means basically you've hit it, it's like simulating you hitting enter on the keyboard. So now we're at the bottom of the next line, and then we're going to concatenate the word heads. So this is going to update the text box, and so this is the new updated version of that. Now, of course, if the random number is not 0, then it's got to be 1. So I put an else statement over here, and we're just changing everything to tails. So pctcoin.image, we're going to assign image tails, and once again, I'm going to update the text box by concatenating that with going to the beginning of the next line and spelling out the word tails, displaying the word tails, concatenate all that together, that's what that plus symbol means in this context, and assigning it to the text property of txt_list. In other words, we're updating txt_list. Okay, all right, and that's it. Pretty short program, but still, a really cool way of flipping a coin. So let's see what happens here. Let me run it one more time. And so we're going to make sure that everything builds successfully. So down over here, everything is built successfully. Wonderful. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to flip the coin. Quarters, a heads appears, then heads, and then heads, and heads, and then tails, and so forth and so on. And if you do this enough, you should get approximately 50-50. You have a 50% chance of heads coming up. You have a 50% chance of tails coming up. And over the long run, you'll see that that's in fact the case. I can scroll down and take a look at the history of how many heads have come up, how many tails have come up. And that is it. So this is Professor Robert Solis. I hope this video lesson was helpful. Have a good day. See you next time.